the whole world is watching. And certainly the opponents of this revolution, the buggy whip manufacturers of this decade who see a whole new industry coming, they're going to be watching to see how the money's spent. And so our first test, your first test, is to make sure this $100 billion is spent well and to effect. And at the Apollo Alliance, we'd like you to think about 5 principles as you expend this money and move this money into the marketplace. The focus ought to be first on creating quality green-collar jobs, making sure that jobs are local, they pay good wages, they have opportunities for skill development and career advancement. Secondly, it's important that we be transparent and accountable, and people see how the money moves and what it can produce. We've got a great opportunity. Thirdly, we've got to make sure that this isn't just a pot of money to go to those who are connected and have lobbyists who have power, but that we reach into communities of color and the communities who are so often overlooked and left behind in the wake of economic progress.
Like mine?
Fourth, in everything you do in public policy, whether it's building a new building, launching a new infrastructure project, everything you do, think about how you can apply the resources to make that endeavor clean and green. And finally, let's create green jobs at scale. When we do energy efficiency, let's take whole neighborhoods. Let's show to the world that with concentrated effort, we can make an impact. This is a pilot program. Look, $100 billion is a lot of money, but in a $13 trillion economy, it will not transform the world. But it's our first chance to make an impact and to show this nation what can be done with an activist public sector committed to national purpose. The Green Revolution is just starting. It's going to become a reality if we continue to make the sweeping investments and policy changes. If we have entrepreneurs and public officials willing to take risks, the risk of failure so we can succeed big. And finally, it's going to take the elemental act of politics and belief. Politics is at its best is one person believing enough to organize 10, to organize 100, to organize 1,000, to organize 10,000, to organize 100,000, to ultimately bring millions along. And we have work to do to make the case for this new national mission. We're just starting, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I've seen what's happened all over this country in the renewable energy, clean energy sector with no help from the federal government. In fact, active resistance from the Bush-Cheney administration. I'm hopeful because even in tough economic times, we've seen 500,000 jobs created in the clean energy sector in the last 3 years. And I'm hopeful because all over the country, wherever I go, I see innovators and entrepreneurs and believers who know we can get this done. But perhaps I'm most hopeful because I was lucky enough to have gone to California public schools and gotten a good lesson in American history growing up. And I've seen what this country's faced before. All of us know that we faced tremendous challenges and in some respects dwarf what we see today. Think for a minute about America in the midst of the Civil War. 600,000 Americans dead of disease or on the battlefield. A nation literally shattered. It's at that moment in our history when Abraham Lincoln charters the Transcontinental Railroad. When he pushes through Congress the Land Grant Act that creates hundreds of colleges that train the workers that made America the economic behemoth it was in the 20th century. It's at that very time when he pushes through the Homestead Act that for the first time makes millions of Americans equity owners in our economy. Think for a moment about the 1930s, when Franklin Roosevelt himself said this nation was one-third ill-housed, ill-clothed, and ill-fed. Fascism on the march, the very notion of democracy at risk. It's at that moment that Franklin Roosevelt mobilizes the political will of this country, the political capital, the capital of this country, to create a new deal that over the next decade made the strongest economy in the world with the broadest base of participation. I grew up in America where my father reminded me we were different from any other country on earth because we were not a country where the very few had all the wealth and everyone else struggled. And that was the legacy of America coming out of the Depression. And for those who doubt whether we can make this conversion to a clean energy economy in 10 years, let me remind you that when we entered World War II, America still had a horse-drawn artillery. 3 years and 8 months later, we stood astride the world as the arsenal of democracy powerful economy in the history of mankind. Let me close with this thought. When John Kennedy spoke to the nation in May of 1961 and announced our decision to go to the moon in the first Apollo mission, here's what he said. He said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. We choose to go to the moon because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills." Kennedy backed that up with real commitments, $3.5 billion a year in a then $600 billion a year economy. That's $70 billion a day just to put a man on the moon. Surely, if our parents' generation could make that kind of commitment to explore the heavens on the notion it would somehow enrich all of us, we can do the same to build an economy with enduring strength and to preserve this planet. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for having me here today. Let's get on to it. Thank you.
These women